Welcome to my YouTube channel Wise Whispers, where silence speaks. Eric, a 66-year-old retired schoolteacher, stood silently in the middle of the living room he had built with his own hands, his heart pounding like it didn't belong to him anymore. The words still echoed in his ears, sharp and cold. Either you serve me or you leave. They weren't said in anger. That would have been easier to forgive. They were said calmly, almost casually, by his son's wife. And in that moment, something inside Eric broke, but something else awakened too. Without another word, he turned, walked to his small room, and reached for his old suitcase. Eric had spent most of his life believing that family was everything. He had worked tirelessly for over 40 years as a teacher, saving every penny, sacrificing every comfort, all to build a secure future for his only son, Daniel. After his wife, Martin, passed away 10 years ago, Eric devoted himself even more to Daniel. He was not just a father anymore, he became mother, mentor, and friend. When Daniel married Clara, Eric was genuinely happy. He welcomed her into his home with warmth and sincerity. He even handed over the management of the house to the young couple, believing it was their time to lead. But slowly, things began to change. At first, it was small. Clara would make comments about how old-fashioned Eric was. Then she began assigning him small tasks, like bringing her tea or cleaning up after dinner. Eric didn't mind. He thought it was just part of adjusting to a new family dynamic, but over time, the respect disappeared. Eric, clean the kitchen. Eric, why is the laundry not done? Eric, don't sit there, it's my spot. She stopped calling him father or even by name with respect. To her, he became a servant. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. But each time Eric looked at his son, hopping for support, Daniel would look away. I don't want to create problems, Daniel would say. Please just adjust. That word became Eric's silent prison. The ultimatum came on a quiet afternoon. Clara was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone while Eric carefully placed tea on the table. You're late, she said without looking up. I'm sorry, Eric replied softly. I wasn't feeling well today. Finally looked at him, her eyes cold. I'm tired of your excuses. Let's make things clear. Either you serve properly in this house or you leave. I won't tolerate this anymore. The cup in Eric's hand trembled. He turned to Daniel, who stood by the window. Daniel, Eric's voice was barely a whisper, but Daniel said nothing. That silence hurt more than the words, and that's when Eric understood. He no longer had a home. Back in his room, Eric folded his clothes slowly. Each item carried memories. His old sweater Martin had knitted, his teaching certificates, a photograph of Daniel as a child sitting on his shoulders. A tear rolled down his cheek, but he didn't stop. I gave everything, he murmured. Maybe I forgot to keep something for myself. He picked up the photo and placed it gently inside the suitcase. As he stepped out of the room, Clara didn't even look at him. Daniel finally spoke, but his voice was weak. Where will you go? Eric paused at the door. I don't know, he said, but wherever it is, I hope I find respect. With that, he walked out. The world outside felt unfamiliar. For the first time in decades, Eric had no plan, no destination. He walked slowly, dragging his suitcase behind him until he reached a small park. Sitting on a bench, he watched children play, laughter filling the air. For a moment, he closed his eyes and remembered the days when Daniel was one of those children. Life changes, he whispered. As evening approached, a gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. Excuse me, sir, are you okay? Eric looked up to see a young woman, probably in her early 30s, holding a small child's hand. I'm fine, he replied, forcing a smile, but something in his eyes told a different story. Name is Aisha, she said kindly. You don't look fine. Eric hesitated, then for some reason he couldn't explain, he told her everything. Aisha listened quietly, her expression filled with compassion. No one deserves that, she said firmly. Especially not someone who gave his life to his family. Eric sighed. What choice do I have? Aisha smiled gently. You always have a choice. Sometimes walking away is not losing, it's saving yourself. That night, Aisha arranged a small room for Eric in a community center where she volunteered. It wasn't much, a bed, a table, and a window, but to Eric it felt like peace. Days turned into weeks. Eric began helping at the center, teaching children, organizing books, sharing stories. Slowly he found purpose again. The children loved him. Eric, they would call, running towards him. For the first time in years, Eric felt valued, respected, alive. One day, as Eric was teaching a group of children, he saw a familiar figure standing at the door. Daniel, he looked tired, older. Father, Daniel said softly. Eric stood still. What are you doing here? He asked calmly. Daniel stepped forward, his eyes filled with regret. I'm sorry, he said. I should have stood up for you, I was weak. And now Clara has left me. Eric didn't react. I lost everything, Daniel continued. And I realized I lost you first. Filled the room. I don't expect forgiveness, Daniel said. But can you come back home? Eric looked around, the children, the room, the life he had rebuilt. Then he looked at his son. Daniel, he said gently, home is not a place where you are tolerated, it's a place where you are respected. Filled Daniel's eyes. I understand, he whispered. Eric placed a hand on his shoulder. I forgive you, he said, but I won't go back to who I was. That evening, Eric sat by the window watching the sunset. For the first time in a long time, his heart felt light. He had lost a house, but he had found himself. Moral of the story: respect is the foundation of every relationship, especially within a family. Love without respect becomes control, and sacrifice without boundaries leads to suffering. Sometimes walking away is not weakness, it is the courage to choose dignity over comfort.